As many of you certainly know, on the 24th of February 2022, the Russian army invaded Ukraine with the forces that the country had been amassing for the past months at the border with its neighbor. If you followed up for a while, you know that already a year ago we reported of a worrying amassing of Russian warships in the Black Sea. While it is true that Ukrainian officials perceived being at war with Russia since 2014, when the country took Crimea and guerrilla warfare started in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, the government realized a clear shift in proportion in the war effort. The fact is, Russia invaded a neighboring country. From an international law perspective, this is a crime. But since Putin seems to have been miscalculated the war effort, he has been starting to bomb cities, killing Ukrainian soldiers and civilians indiscriminately. As much as 38 countries presented evidence to the International Criminal Tribunal at The Hague, documenting Russian war crimes. Teams from the Ukrainian and the Russian side have been agreeing the setting of human corridors to allow the transition of civilians to escape the country. Still, Russians have not respected the commitment on several occasions. A few legitimate questions you might have are the following. Ukrainians are very patriotic and nationalistic. This is a good thing for the morale of the troops, and in case you are living a war of aggression like in this case, your soldiers are also on the right side because they simply want to defend their homes. At the same time, Ukrainians do not hate Russians. They hate the Russian government and its actions since 2014. It is not the same thing, because many Ukrainian families have Russian family members and vice versa. These peoples are essentially brothers, but not treated alike. Also, Ukraine is resisting for political reasons. You must consider that Ukraine is a liberal democracy, even though a flawed one. While Zelensky and his administration can be criticized, they have been elected, unlike Putin. They represent the will of Ukrainians. As such, since Maidan, Ukrainian citizens fought to have a state which is oriented towards the European Union, and why not, towards NATO, even though neither organization accepted them yet. This idea falls under the concept of sovereignty. Each state is, in its own, sovereign and should be able to decide of its own destiny. Yet, if bigger countries just want to decide for them, they are treating them as de facto states, which are organizations with limited sovereignty. It's a matter of free choice. He declared officially that he wanted to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. Denazify is just propaganda. Ukraine has nothing to do with Nazism, for the things we already said. Moreover, Zelensky himself has Jewish origins. Fascist would be also inappropriate, as the country is much more liberal democratic than Russia. On the other hand, Russia is an autocratic regime. Yet, demilitarize may be the ultimate goal of Putin, that saw Ukraine as a threat. Ukraine militarized since 2014 because saw the taking of Crimea and the eastern region as a serious threat from Russia. Still, if this is the case, it may indicate that Putin will not extend the conflict to countries such as the Republic of Moldova and Georgia. Also, it seems like the effort is not going as expected. In his worst-case scenario, Putin will be taking Odessa to unify Transnistria to Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk, and hence Russia. His best-case scenario is, of course, Kyiv capitulation. 10,000 Russian troops already died. 90% of the committed 190,000 soldiers are already on the field. By comparison, in 9 years of war in Afghanistan, considered the worst war in the history of the Soviet Union, the Soviet army lost 15,000 soldiers. Consider that the war in Ukraine has been going on only for roughly 15 days. Russia has also lost 860 pieces of military equipment against 250 of Ukraine. Putin is a former Secret Service officer. He does not trust his own military, so much that he has a department of the Secret Services that monitors the military. Furthermore, he is so isolated in power that he is surrounded by yes-men who fear contradicting him. They did not prepare for war, but still expect to overpower Ukraine for continuous bombing that do not necessarily involve ground action. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and the alliance is a defensive organization. Plus, Putin threatened nuclear strikes if NATO intervenes. This means that NATO cannot even guarantee a no-fly zone over the country, as Zelensky asked, because this would mean engaging in a direct conflict with Russian planes. Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, and actions are deliberated by the Security Council. This allows the country to veto decisions it does not like. In fact, Russia vetoed the resolution on the condemnation for the invasion of Ukraine, and while the General Assembly approved it with a large majority, these amount to nothing in terms of intervention or in terms of actions. Sanctions may slow down the Russian economic capability to finance the war if Ukrainians will resist for long enough. But attacking oligarchs will not threaten Putin's grip on power. They do not have any serious political power, rather they are indebted to Putin. Now, there is no clear path to a shift in power in Russia, and Putin does not want to lose his face. In other words, he is the problem. Of course, the best case scenario for Ukraine is defeating Russia and liberating the country, but Zelensky seems to be losing morale with the passing of time. On a personal note, I studied Russian and the Russian culture for years. I visited Ukraine a few times and made friends there. I know stories of people that fled the war and people forced to stay by the government in case they need to fight. War is bad, war is horrible, but Ukraine is defending itself, and we shall expect them to do it. The Russian people is not bad. Some among them support Putin and some do not. It's not about Russians versus Ukrainians, it is about Putin's dystopic will to recreate a Russian Soviet successor state that exerts influence over former Soviet countries that have been independent for more than 30 years. And this is not all right. I'm Understanding Politics. Thank you for watching.